Hi, Jackie. Hello, Jackie. Yes. Right, we're talking about it on WhatsApp. You have to put in the number. All you do is say join the meeting and then type in.
So I'm going to ask everybody to mute their mics, and then there will be some time for questions.
Kate, your sound is poor right now. It was good before. But
Can't hear you anymore either.
Can you hear me now?
No.
you sound a bit far away and distorted.
Okay, how about now?
No.
Similar.
Similar.
It,
How about, I wonder if so many people
I have
cameras off.
I have a thought. It's not, Kate, it's not a problem of not enough bandwidth, it doesn't sound like, but it sounds like it might be a problem of looping sound from all the people with their microphones open. I think your sound may improve if people who are not speaking mute themselves, and then you might come through clear. I think there's some kind of, like,
Yes.
you're looping.
I'm going to mute everybody. Then there will be time for questions later, and I'm also opening the chat box, so as I'm going, then I can look and see if there's questions, but there will be time for questions. So how's my voice now? You can unmute also, Sandra.
No, it's the same.
It's the same.
Same for me. I can't hear you very well at all.
It sounds as if you're a bit far from your microphone, Kate.
Okay, so I'm going to try a headset, see if that helps. Okay, can you hear me now?
Much better.
Okay, good. We'll go with that. Okay, so it seems like everybody's on, and we're just going to move this chat box over to the side, and we'll get started. We've got a lot to talk about today, and sorry. There we are. And I'm actually going to minimize the cameras so I'm not seeing everybody, but I will open it up in the end when we go, okay? Or in the middle when we're doing questions. And Sarah, if you're seeing any chats that I need to pay attention to, will you just send me a text and we'll try to move on. So hopefully I just want to start and say I'm really glad that everybody is here with us. And, you know, this work keeps growing because this vaccine agenda is just monopolizing and exponentially getting way out of control. And it's really easy to feel discouraged and alone. And that's part of the strength of FHCi, is for us all to come together and create a momentum from our joined you know, it's a David and Goliath kind of story here, but, and hopefully everybody got their renewal packets with their new little business cards. We wanted to put it in the verbiage of the parent wanting to share with their friends and family, and just having a few words that's really, you know, something that they may not be able to say themselves, but this little card, they can say, hey, I've got something I want to share with you, and that. And so you can order more of those. So what we're going to talk about today is looking at what we are really doing with HP. we're going to look at our new initial health profile and the mother's health, looking at developing immune systems and the infant's intestinal lining. And what is disease and why is polio first? So we've changed the order of the program. We're going to look at the program booklets that have all been updated, except for Portuguese. Mariana, we need to get with you on that. Modifications to existing paperwork and new pricing options. And of course, you're all here because you've got the password update. So we're going to go through the philosophical parts first, and then look at the details with the booklets and paperwork and pricing options like that, the practical stuff. So I want to start with really what we're talking about in the public forum is there is such a hype on, you know, infectious disease or killing everybody and you're crazy and blah, 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 blah. And what we're doing with HP has really nothing to do with that. You know, with the understanding that these infectious diseases actually have a reason to be and a purpose for the immune system, particularly the childhood infectious diseases. And what we're doing with HP is to educate the immune system about that. We do have another training session that's in development, and that's our next one, which is our ethics and legal issues. And during that session, we're really going to hone in the language to help you guys clarify and be really succinct in what you're saying, and within these ethical and legal parameters, and also just you know, keeping the paradigm clear. And I know you guys know most of this stuff, but some of it I'm just reviewing, or if you're still new with HP, you know, how to get the language going more in yourself. So what does it mean on a practical level? So we're going to explore that in this first section as we go. How do we interface with our families about HP, and what is HP supervision? We're going to just look at the research that's come in, and we've learned a fair amount about this role of the HP supervisor in the direct efficacy, or whether people are actually doing the program. So a lot of these changes that I'm going to be talking about today are from the information that we've gathered over a year, and just putting them all together all in one place and having all the changes come at one time, as opposed to, you know, bits and pieces here and there. Yeah, the PowerPoint, you can get it at the end. So just some little facts. Since we had our family membership, we've had 533 children enrolled. And the first submission was with Noel Peterson in Texas. There he is. There were 22 of those enrolled previously, either in research or not, that joined that group, so having a family membership. And so far in 2019, we've had 84 enrolled, and 51 of those were in February. So that's the busiest month we've had so far. And it's really nice to see that. And I just did check on Amazon on book sales. And whereas before, the solution book was operating at about, you know, 400,000, you know, sales. 1 in 400,000 sales, I'm sorry, were the solution. Now it's 1 in 23,000. So the sales of the solution are going up. Same with the vaccine free book. It was 1 in 800 and some thousand, and now it's down to 1 in 400 and some thousand. So it's selling twice as much as it was before. So we're all happy about this. People are really looking for this. So some of the results from our research, and we had applied to the HRI conference, Homeopathic Research International Conference in London for June, and our paper was not accepted. Or it just doesn't mean that it was rejected. It means that they had 130 applicants and they only accepted like 25. So we were on the first sort of clean out. And there still is more work to do with the research. Sue Sandin and I worked extensively last year, and Sarah with all the paperwork. And then there's been a bit of a hiatus since November to get back to this. So what we just did is tally all the numbers, and then we have to review the paperwork that was submitted and come up with what's happening with remedy responses and so on and so forth. So no contact also means that despite HP supervisors reaching out to the families didn't respond. And then we also had a number of our HP supervisors that didn't contact with us despite multiple renewal or reminders. So that's more than half. We don't know what happened with the program. And I know some of the families in my, that I had signed up, I had even ongoing relationship with them, and despite multiple calls, I never got the paperwork back from them. So then there were a number that if they just did a few doses or they gave up, those families sort of self-edited themselves and said, oh, I don't need to send in paperwork. But even so, we wanted paperwork from everybody, but it's too late now to get any more paperwork, so don't call anybody anymore. We've got all the numbers. So of those who submitted, 41 withdrew, 37 stopped and started, and that means in the first 200 series, they took some doses and they stopped. And we did get a fair number of comments about these that stopped and started, and or started and stopped. And some of that information has actually helped us hone what we're doing with the program. Same with the 53 that had completed the 200 series. And this is all within, well, let's see, the only one that we had that 50 at the bottom here had completed within 50 months. 50 of the 116 that completed the program. So 28 completed the 10M and the 200 series, one of the 10M and 200 series. And then there were a number that were the 14 that they just had one or two more doses, the last contact we had, and they were going to be completing. So we can add that to the total of complete, theoretically. Yeah, all the families. Okay, yeah, so Sarah's got that. Thanks. Next is, so looking at the research from the families that dropped out, this is the most important information of us because we want to make sure that the program is effective. We've set up a model. It was designed to be, here's a kit, it's a self-administered model, can you do it? And we've discovered that a number of families can't do it just on those parameters, that they need more support from their HP supervisors. And later when we get into the pricing schedule, we have the option of these extra visits, and this is to help build the supervisor's relationship with their families. And so some of the comments that we got back were, I couldn't contact my supervisor. I didn't know when I should have contacted my supervisor, or I contacted my supervisor and they didn't have enough information for us. So part of our goal for this year is to really get all you supervisors, very facile, if that's the right word, that homeoprophylaxis just rolls off your tongue, you're confident, and that builds trust for the families doing with it. So there's not enough education about healthy immune system function, education in the public. And I just read a thing, and I know that this is true, is that we have in the medical model, the infectious disease model under the medical model is that bacteria and viruses cause disease, and they're the bad meanies. And they've been propagating this for the last 30 years. And somewhere along the line, I know when I was in homeopathy school, we talked about Louis Pasteur, and the soil is it's not the pathogen, it's the soil that it grows upon, and that really is still true today, but so many people don't know that. So our public, these are our families that are signing up for HP, they have this other stuff in their head, and they're trying to use HP and apply it into that paradigm. And so we need more education also to remind you guys that this holistic model is really the basis of HP and how it goes. Now, there were a number of children that overreacted to all their initial doses. And so rather than just a mild immune response, it actually derailed the child's health, and either the family didn't contact the supervisor or they did, and there was some supervision, and I even had some in mind that no matter what I did, you know, we're still like shooting in the dark trying to figure out why this child is responding like that. And so because of this, we're looking at taking a little bit more information on the initial upfront, particularly the health of the mother, because we think this is part of that reason. And then the contact time of the families. So yes, using the research data to inform us on program development. So this is the initial health profile. And I want to say that initially I had intended to have every document updated on the website, but then I thought to myself that it might be better to go through it and just sit in it for a few days, everything that's presented, and see if there's any other tweaks we need to make on this. And I'm sorry if it sounds a little bit sketchy, but that was what I came up with. So what we want to know from the mother is what kind of birth there was. And this is all important. We're going to talk about the biome in a minute. And the biome seems to be the #1 factor about how children are responding to the HP. Also, were there vaccines, antibiotics, and other medications, vitamin K shot? So the ideal scenario is home birth, healthy mother, no vaccines at birth, child has an intact mucous membranes of the intestinal lining where their immune system starts. Worst case scenario is cesarean birth, mother on various medications, strep B, antibiotics, vitamin K shot, and the first few vaccines. And all of that combination sets up and or a premature birth. Because there's certain developmental pieces that need to happen immunologically before introducing HP and vaccines, of course. So then looking at, was there breast milk formula, or soy formula? This also makes a difference. So there's vitamin K shot. Oral solution is better because that's normally how the child will get the vitamin K. Normally through exposure to the biome in the mother's vagina, they're going to get the bacteria, and the bacteria makes the vitamin K. So that would be the best scenario versus being injected, because that vitamin K has latex also and a few other ingredients. And anyways, it needs to get into the intestines as opposed to into the blood like that directly. So soy milk formula, and this is also important. I'll just let everybody know that today is the last day. I hope to be done and uploading the glyphosate-free book, and the GMO products completely ramp up all autoimmune diseases and immune system function, and they dysregulate. Anyways, there's a whole line of that, and most soy formulas is genetically modified and has glyphosate in it. So milk formula is probably better, but there are, of course, a number of children that are allergic to that. So then previous disease exposure. So we're hoping that this is going to be a bit more of an inclusion-exclusion criteria. Too, you're going to look at this and you're going to review it and go, you know, I think it's going to be better if we start off with some constitutional work or start getting the biome together and then introduce HP just a little bit later. And also then it gives you the opportunity to discuss with the families going back to what is immune system education, what does it mean being exposed to these infectious diseases while the immune system is developing, and what more can we do to help that immune system develop. So goat milk formula is probably better than dairy formula. Mostly it's grown in, you know, organic or small creameries, and just as long as it's not commercial grain like grass fed. And yeah. Okay, so next question or next. So the infant's intestinal lining seems to be the most important thing defining or determining the health outcomes of that child. And it begins to develop in utero. The amniotic fluid is full of the appropriate minerals that bathe that intestinal lining. Initially, it's the minerals and proteins. Eventually, it becomes the urea of the child. And as they start processing through, you know, their metabolites and metabolic process. And the mother's microbiome is also present in the placenta and is influencing this. So if you've had a mother who's had multiple antibiotics, this child's biome is already going to be infected with yeast and molds. And this also affects the T1, T2 ratio. So normally the mother's immune system is suppressed away from T2, which is antibodies, into a T1, which is general immune response. And infants are born in that general immune response. And that's the great thing about the HP, is that we are working with the general immune response. And what vaccines do is try to force or jump up this T2 ratio. Well, the T2 is, the reason it's suppressed is because otherwise the mother will produce antibodies against the baby as well. And so to accommodate for that, to not reject the baby, this T2 response has to be just normally lowered. I guess that's the hormones in pregnancy that do that. When they give Daptocel or Tdap in pregnancy, it artificially elevates this T2 response and sets up not only autoimmune in the mother, but then it's going to show up in the baby. And this, that sets the platform for more allergic kind of symptoms. Then this intestinal lining is very important in that it actually takes 1 to 2 years for the lining to fully develop. And it's through being exposed to the bacteria as the child passes through the birth canal. And the first, you know, the fingers and suckling on the breast, and the intestinal lining is actually the gateway to allowing what comes in and what doesn't come in. And if that intestinal lining doesn't form properly, then there's openings in it, and all kinds of pathogens can seep into the body and start affecting, you know, general system inflammation, but then it can also stretch to the neurologic system and get inflammation into the brain like that. And the biome is the bacteria that reside in the lining are not only important for all neurotransmitters and help to regulate the endocrine and the immune system, they themselves help to digest food and all of that. So you need the healthy lactobacillus kind of bacteria, bifidobacteria in the biome, and this is one of the places where glyphosate actually starts the destruction in infants and people, is destroying this biome here. That's vaginal childbirth. So if there's any antibiotics given in vaccines in pregnancy and at birth, it right away sends the infant's immune system off of a track. So one of the reasons why that T2 response is reduced and at birth is reduced, it's so that these normal bacteria can inhabit the body without there being an immune response. And what that means is, like, streptococcal bacteria is a normal lacto-producing bacteria. It's supposed to be on our body. But if you're born through antibiotics and have a high yeast content in the first months of life, then when the yeast goes down, or maybe they're come to see a homeopath to help address this, and you are exposed to streptococcal, all of a sudden your immune system is having an immune response to that strep. And whereas, you know, the convention would have us think that the strep is the bad, big bad meanie, and then you need to take more antibiotics. It's just that at that time, as the immune system, because it wasn't exposed right at infancy, at that time, it's trying to establish a normal, healthy relationship with that strep by producing a fever, febrile response, and helping to keep that bacteria in check. So, does ROGAM affect the T1, T2? I'm not sure. I do know that there's mercury in the ROGAM, and I just really, have been a bit blind to studying that, but I do expect that there's something about that. So hepatitis B, which is really interesting, hepatitis B is incubated on Saccharomyces cerevisiae, which we have a remedy torula made from that. But hepatitis B vaccine, when it's given at birth, the immune system does not make a response to it, because it's what that birth process, just like I said, it's like they're born into this life, and it's like, oh, this is the external environment, and then Hep B comes along, it's like, oh, that's just part of the external environment. And so then hepatitis B is an RNA virus, and it's a retrovirus, and it goes in and it starts operating in the epigenetics in liver and metabolic function, because there's no barrier to that, if we could say. And so then it starts changing. I personally think that all the MTHFR gene mutations are a direct result of this hepatitis B vaccine changing the epigenetics in the methylation issues because of its effect in the liver. Audio is very garbled. Okay, I'm unplugging. Is that any better? Somebody put up sounds good. Got it plugged. Okay, plugging in. Okay, I got it plugged in. So as a remedy to think of, aqua amniotica can help to reestablish that intestinal biome if you're seeing all these other issues there. It's the original cell salt we were bathed in, full of and sodium phosphate, calcium sulfur, all the cell salts. It also has other trace minerals, and most importantly, I'm seeing are the copper, zinc, and iron.
We can't hear you, and you can't hear you anymore.
You can't hear me. I'm plugged in. Oh my goodness. Can you hear me now? Be quiet. Still distant. I don't know what to do. Let's see. Okay, can you hear me now? If I do that, was better before. Nope. Better? I have one other headset. 1 second. Okay, can anybody hear me now? This one? Worse. Has to do, what about without anything? No. Okay, going back to my other headset. Good. Now, okay, perfect. We're just going to continue on. Yay. I don't know if this is a new computer. I'm just wondering if the jack is a problem with the jack. So back to copper, iron, and zinc. So there are receptor sites throughout our nervous system, throughout our immune system, throughout the hormonal system that are governed. The ion gates are either controlled by copper, iron, or zinc. Some of them selenium also. It's too quiet. How about now? Much better. Yes.
Kate, it was better when you just held it by your mouth, just recently.
This right here?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to do that then. Okay, thanks. So what's happening in utero is that, and as all the neurotransmitter receptor sites are being developed, cranial, in the brain, is the amniotic fluid is bathing those. And what we're seeing in the vaccine damaged children is copper and zinc are the most important remedies to help normalize or get not only the brain inflammation, but all of the neurologic symptoms that are showing up in a regressive state. And it's starting from the intestinal lining like that. So we just said all that. One of the feelings of aqua amniotica is feeling like there's something missing, feeling like, my goodness, something being lost, being abandoned, wanting to go back into the ocean where you can breathe underwater, a sense of control to protect oneself from being hurt again or abandoned. There's a feeling of vulnerability and a vigilance to protect oneself. Deep grief, collective grief for humanity and the Mother Earth. This feeling of vulnerability, we're going to come to it again in a little bit with some of the other things we're going to talk about. So it takes 1 to 2 years for that intestinal lining to develop. And it's through that exposure and the biome of the intestinal lining that helps to mature it, and the symbiotic microbes that establishes the biome of the infant. I'm holding it. I am holding it. Amniotic fluid. Yeah, that's it. So the intestinal lining is the organ of discernment. That's the most important thing about this organ, is what do I let in and what do I reject? How do I think for myself? What do I need to respond to or not? What is nutrition or waste? Will my body benefit, and what needs to be discarded? So the bacteria helps with that, the mother's milk, the first foods, and nutrition that sustains health are all touching upon this mucous membrane. And what we see now is so much garbage and crap, and everybody's immune system is on auto, overdrive, because this intestinal lining has been severely damaged. Inability for the body-mind to discriminate. And when that intestinal lining is damaged like that, it heightens the fight-flight response and the ability to respond in a better way. So I think we need to change the name of disease because it gives this idea, dis-ease, that there's something bad with it. What we understand is that they are intelligent beings designed to elicit a developmental process in the individual or in the populace, that they actually have their own prerogative, and by refusing to participate in that, like somehow we humans are separate from the entire world, is the only people that's getting damaged from it is us, right? So that infectious disease process is intended to activate the survival mechanism of the individual. So we need the disease, but how do we get the disease? And there are some people, if you follow, homeopaths, that are against HP because in their mindset, they're still thinking that we're trying to prevent disease. We're not trying to prevent disease. We're trying to activate the diseases because the diseases are no longer present in the population. And without having those diseases, the immune system doesn't get to capitulate itself, and it ends up in a state of differentiation or undifferentiation and leads to cancer like that. Is it the bacteria or the soil that's the cause of disease? And we know that it is the soil, and that's what we work with homeopathy. What is the immune system and how does it function? That activation takes place through localization and development of a fever and a discharge, and those are all the general immune responses that we don't get when you inject a vaccine, because we're bypassing the intestinal lining, because most diseases are oral fecal or through aerial, and that through the touch on that mucous membrane, you're activating all of these things. So each disease has served to evolve humanity. And there's a bell curve of disease or immune responses to those diseases until we've actually learned about that process, learned about that disease. And that general immune system response establishes harmony with the pathogen. So all of these we need to keep in mind, and that there's immune system memory, that once you've seen that, you can be reactivated and reminded of how it works before. So this is what we're doing with the HP. So I want to look at, this is the first 200 series in the UK program with the addition of tuberculinum. It's not in the US booklet. It is in the Portuguese booklet. And what this tuberculinum does, and the reason why we have it is because throughout Europe, there is still given the BCG vaccine, so everybody is already in a heightened tubercular state. We've added polio, and I'm going to go through each of these diseases in the following slides to give more information about that and why. So the first week would be tuberculinum. If they're not in the UK program or EU program, then at 2 weeks of age, it would be a single dose of polio, and 3 weeks, the triple dose. And if you had the opportunity to watch that little video on, it was after watching that movie, I started really to think about it. I know that we had added polio in, we replaced it with Lathyrus, from Lathyrus, just to try to affect some of the fear that the whole polio problem, was driven by, and we're going to understand in a few minutes what it is about polio that makes that fear. So, but from that research, I started thinking oral polio, first week of life, helping the intestinal lining and affecting the whole immune system. And so that's what that was. The streptococcinum, we had previously oriented it in later after pneumococcinum, but because the streptococcal bacteria is the #1 reasons that people go for antibiotics, that if we introduce it early in life, then that's going to establish a healthy relationship with that bacteria, and there's no longer need to be fevers or the development of all the other secondary problems which are now showing up as pandas. Is because they didn't get exposure to the streptococcal. So somebody's got a question here. I was told people to hold off until the child was about 3 months of age. And yes, we want to introduce it right away so that they can get that intestinal information. So we're going to come to that and why these diseases more, just a little more detail. So you'll notice that the program is shorter. And so it was that the morbillinum was given at 16 and 17 months. And now it's at 14 or 15 months. Now, this is right on the cusp of when, so normally infants' immune systems have the ability to develop antibodies to measles at about a year to a year and a half. Now, depending if they're preterm babies, it's going to be, gestational age. You have to calculate out like that. There's no real risk of giving it sooner, but whether that they can develop the full immune response that, a 2-year-old would develop is, something to, we need more research on that. And if anybody saw the Vax movie, where they showed that when they delayed the MMR vaccine to 3 years of age, there was less incidence of autism. And it has to do with that immune response. Well, some of it has to do with that immune response. And something is also, it's measles is an RNA virus. And anyways, we're going to get to that in a little bit. And for those who are older children, you can rearrange it, particularly with the measles outbreak. You can go ahead and do that now, given, are they older than 1.5 years of age? Or but I would still say to do these first ones, the polio and the streptococcinum, and then reorder as needed. And even for adults, so part of my process was to take the polio nosode, we're going to get to that story in a minute, just to ask questions. Is this safe? You know, what am I doing? Am I going to cause paralysis in babies? You know, trying to be responsible for what really is the thinking behind the program, and is it safe to do? So we'll get to that in 1 second. So let's first look at tuberculosis. So if you have any families in any of these definitely red or orange countries, it's interesting how they've marked that there's no tuberculosis throughout Europe, except for we know that the tubercular miasm is rampant throughout Europe. So, and that's because of the heavy vaccination. And it's really interesting here in, I know Lebanon, they use it, in Turkey, you know, yeah, it's curious where this chart came from, but so what we're trying to do with the tuberculinum at the beginning of the program, let's just talk about the nature of tuberculosis, is calcification to build a tubercle around the tubercular bacillus. And in order to maintain that calcification, there is a heightened vigilance in the immune system with an elevated T2 response. And that will keep the calcium there. And it's pulling calcium from the bones. And it's interesting, you know, calc phos is a very tubercular remedy. And you can just see the parallel of how, you know, when you deplete all the calcium and the phosphate from the bones, you're going to get this weak bone, weak, tired, you know, all of that, very much tubercular symptoms. It's an allergic response, and you see it in other, you know, asthma, allergic asthma, hyperactivity, stuff like that. So the tuberculinum nosode is not about preventing tuberculosis. If you've never been exposed to tuberculosis, okay, let's go this way. So PPD test is a skin test to determine if you've had previous exposure to tuberculosis. The thing of it is they're actually putting tuberculin in your arms. So if you get tuberculosis PPD test over and over and over again, pretty soon you're going to show up as a positive test that you've seen it before, because your immune system is recognizing it and is going to show, oh, now I'm going to make an immune response. And actually it drives a tubercular state. And what we're doing with tuberculinum is to clear that miasmatic influence. So this is important also anywhere throughout India, Pakistan. Of course, it's important in countries that have had some sort of economic or political oppression, and European countries too, like that. It's to rebalance the T1, T2 response, family history of tuberculosis, allergies, or asthma. So yeah, mother in pregnancy has a TB test. Giving tuberculinum helps to clear that from the baby. And what that means by clearing it is you're helping to undo that switch into T2 response back to T1 response to get the general immune system. And the reason why we want to have that at the beginning of the program is because we want general immune system responses from our HP nosodes. But if the system is in a heightened T2 response, you're going to get allergic response. At the outset of immune response is already shifted over to a different, and it's not going to be as effective as the other way. Stone formation, calcium stone formation might be tubercular. Yep, it's more psychotic, but it can be tubercular too. And I guess the pituitary regulates the calcium in levels in the bones, and one of the main places that tuberculosis hits is in the pituitary. And so if you see massive pituitary dysregulation, tuberculinum is the remedy. Also, the way the body tries to address that is to calcify the pituitary, and then you see the growth, excessive bone growth or insufficient growth and all other aspects of the immune system, endocrine system, heavy menses, and so on and so forth like that. So tuberculinum would help to do that, and then you of course want to pair it with a calcium remedy to get the calcium reappropriated to the bones. So this is part of my journey. It was really a surprise to come to all this. Hopefully those of you have watched the Einkorn movie and understanding this ancient wheat. That was the beginning of my journey into writing about glyphosate, and in that process I came across, and everybody's allergic to eating wheat, that when, let's see, polio dates back to the Egyptian times. Here is history of an Egyptian offering to the gods some goods because he's been stricken with polio. And I'm not a hieroglyph reader, but what I understand here is when humans became agrarian, in order to digest wheat, something needed to be done, because previously we actually ate gold. And if you follow, anyways, a whole string of stories that I'm not going to get into, the Einkorn wheat was the first wheat, but then man started hybridizing the wheat, making it have a different kind of gluten. And it's the gliadins in that gluten that we cannot digest. And the gliadins, I'm going to get back, open up the tight junctions of the intestinal lining. And those tight junctions are meant to be closed. Zonulin is a hormone that's secreted by the intestinal lining to regulate the tight junctions. And there are 3 RNA viruses that affect levels of zonulin. One of them is polio. Cholera affects an enzyme, and rotavirus, I missed the part on what that does. But I think it's also limiting the enzyme that digests the excessive zonulin, both of those. But polio, it's more about regulating those tight junctions. And like I said before, that these tight junctions are crucial in that formation of the intestinal lining as an organ of discernment. So when the farmers became settled in one place, the agrarian people, they had to work out their sewer system. And this virus showed up in that sewer system, and infants were exposed to it in infancy, and it closed down the tight junctions, and they remained that way so that they could continue to eat wheat. Now, what's happened since they've introduced the inactivated polio virus, what's happened since they have made sanitation such that we are no longer exposed to contaminated water, we aren't actually exposed to the polio virus. And if it doesn't happen in infancy, then later when you're exposed to it, it actually opens up the tight junctions. And particularly if you're eating wheat and you've never seen it. So in the 50s, when there were the flu epidemics or the polio epidemics, is that they were eating high doses of wheat in the beginnings of the hybridization of the high gluten wheats. And then exposure to wild virus at that time, when those tight junctions open, the virus is able to pass through and then go in and affect the nervous system. So normal symptoms of polio or flu-like diarrhea or fever we may expect to see these symptoms when given the polio nosode later, as opposed to right in the first early 2 weeks and 3 weeks. As a normal immune response, that it's actually closing down the tight junctions. And I know I recently took several doses of the polio. I took it for about a week actually and saw what was happening. And I, like most of us, all have a fair amount of glyphosate toxicity. I've been working on clearing that out of my system. And one of the last things to go was every time I ate any food, my whole intestinal area would just kind of bloat up. And since I've taken that polio nosode, I have no longer any bloating, and my stool is becoming more formed, and I can eat. I'm still not eating wheat, but eating the einkorn wheat, I have no inflammation coming from that. But anyways, the 5% that can get into a paralytic or neurotoxic like symptoms, that's where the polio virus has entered into the nervous system, escaped through the tight junctions. But because there's no active polio virus in our nosode, we just have the energetics of it. I do not believe truth is going to show us what it is, that we're going to see any neurotoxic symptoms from that. We have seen type 1 diabetes and autoimmune conditions coming from enteric viruses, and this may be a preventive for developing diabetes as we go. Nosode is intended to prevent these conditions by down-regulating the tight junctions in infancy. And that reference is the TED Talk that you just talked. And if anybody wants to look at more on this information that I got, this is the link, Polio, Our World Data. And it talks about the history of polio and when it went into epidemic phase, and what the vaccines have done for us is that they've imported the virus in an inactivated state, and that actually heightens the opening of the tight junctions as opposed to the oral, which would close it down. How do you discern if it's a reaction? It should just pass on its own. Yep, if they have a diarrhea. I mean, it's probably clearing whatever is in there. It's probably a healthy response. I'm not saying there's a bad response. It's probably, part of the process of getting that organ of discernment working is that the body goes, oh my goodness, I need to get rid of this too. So the greater amount of crap there is in the individual, the more tendency for more diarrhea. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit more about zonulin. And say if there are people who want to do just the polio nosode, and we're not preventing disease, remember, we're not doing that. We are down-regulating zonulin. You can do it at the 2 weeks, 3 weeks of the program, and then the 10M series and triple, and repeated. And you can do that in a shorter time frame if you really want to work on an individual's health. If you see somebody with severe leaky gut and leaky brain, that would be actually the recommended dosing pattern, or you can just have it spread out, according to the regular schedule. So here's a little diagram of the intestinal lining epithelial secreting zonulin. It's opening these tight junctions, and what happens is the pathologic bacteria get in and excrete toxins, and the toxins go through, or when they're really open, the candida can go through, and then you get systemic candida. We're seeing the streptococcal going in there. That's what's happening with pandas. Anyways, this is really crucial, and I'm just so happy. I wasn't even looking for this, and just as the information was coming forward, it just showed up. So let's see here. First doses are 200, yes. So all RNA viruses, also includes measles, mumps, and rubella, and retroviruses. Hepatitis B is a retrovirus. After exposure to glyphosate, wheat, or gliadin, all drive up the regulation of zonulin. They all open the tight junctions, system-wide inflammation. That's why we see with the MMR, gastrointestinal inflammation, what that RNA virus is doing is it's with glyphosate as the operator is opening that up. That's why we're seeing, and then the measles virus gets into the body and then goes to the brain, and this, you know, what cuprum or zincum is about is the retrocession of measles to the brain, causing cerebral inflammation. System-wide elevated histamine response. So once these antigens enter into the system, then the other white cells are going, wait a second, what's going on? And it starts producing the IgE antibody response and histamine response to just regular foods. And so this explains why people can have systemic food allergies to everything across the board. The culprit and the operator in here is glyphosate, but it's the RNA viruses that are transactivated by that glyphosate. And so it's both together. Anyways, so there's, in the further advanced trainings, I'm going to go more into that dynamic. The spleen overworks to clear the system. And because those tight junctions are open, the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system is heightened, the sympathetic, so that drives into fight-flight response. And this would explain this complete irrational fear of disease. It was activated by the polio vaccines, that everybody is in this fight or flight state. They can't think clearly. And you and I are living amongst these crazies, inability to rationally sort through life events, easily dominated and suppressed, and surrendering your individuality to the control of others. These are all symptoms of the polio nosode. So if you see in this stimulation of the vagus nerve, if you see that case presentation in your practice, yes, PowerPoints are available for review, then consider starting off with polio as the remedy. Okay, back in the thing. Okay, your undue control, an ability to stand up and defend yourself, feeling of being overwhelmed by external forces. Imagine that those barriers are open. Everything is just coming in. There is no discernment, lack of ability to discern what's good for you or not. Downregulating. Okay, so now we're going on to streptococcinum. And again, the dosing schedule starts at 3 weeks, then 5 weeks. This is at the 200C. I didn't mention that there. 10M series at a triple dose and repeated according to the program when you get to it. If it's in a case of recurrent streptococcinum, of course you want to take Candida, because Candida is the other operator in this. When the Candida populations go down, strep populations will go up. So when you're clearing Candida, also staph populations will go up. It's very common for people to show up with either strep throat or impetigo. And so I do an alternating dosing schedule between Candida, strep, Candida, staph, and then nat phos in there, because all of this here is lactic acid that's built up. So these streptococcal is a lacto-fermenting. It's meant to ferment the lactic acid. Candida takes the lactic acid and creates alcohol. Anyways, it's all in this dynamic, and what we're doing by introducing the streptococcal early is establishing that bacteria and also facilitating the reduction of lactic acidosis, which can go to brain inflammation, which is one of the pieces in the pandas. PTSD. For polio, post-traumatic stress disorder. Potentially, it can be any victim situation, I would say the same. And you know, reading on the social media, the parents are like, oh my God, I'm going to see the doctor and they're going to tell me that I have to take these vaccines and I don't know what to do. They are in a paralyzed state. They can't think clearly. They can't sort through the information and they can't defend themselves. That is a polio situation, those kinds of moms. If we could spread polio around in our HP, we could cure a lot of this vaccine situation. So lactobacillus is called a pus-producing bacteria. So I'm going to take the rest of the questions. Let me just keep going, okay? And then at the end of all of these disease ones, before I move on to the practicality, I can open it up and everybody can have an opportunity to say that. So silica is a main remedy for that kind of pus, heparsulf, pulsatilla, calisulf, all of that and they're, let's see. Yep. So that's the immune system responding to that bacteria. The macrophages, if it's out of control population, clombing onto them, then that dumps into the intestinal tract or the nasal pharynx or the lungs to be expectorated out. They're normally occurring in the intestinal tract. HP dose serves to keep the bacteria balance in harmony. And people have this whole thing is like, oh my God, strep's going around, everybody's getting infected. Well, partly we're getting infected by antibiotic resistant strep that have managed to survive through the multiple doses of antibiotics, but it doesn't really go around. There can also be what they call strep carriers. Well, you're supposed to have strep. So this goes back to the soil. We need this in our soil, and because we've been, especially in the Midwest here, they love antibiotics here. Oh, I just had to have antibiotics. I've never had antibiotics. One time I had antibiotics, but it was just to prevent infection from wisdom teeth. So it's not real, really. It's just imagined. Anyways, main homeopathic remedies there. We're going to talk about why each of those. The fevers help to normalize the population. There can be aberrant immune responses. Sorry, my chat box, I need to keep moving around. Rheumatic fever and scarlatina rash were really how it manifested 200 years ago. What happens is the streptococcal will get into the body and then the body starts developing an autoimmune response against the heart tissue. Scarlatina rash is the best scenario, but this also is a slight autoimmune response where it comes out in a rash. You can also see it in something that's called erythema nodosum, where instead of coming as a rash, it's coming as it looks like it's bruising beneath the skin. And what it's doing is it's an autoimmune response against the blood vessels. Or you can see it in a nephritis, so autoimmune response against the kidneys. And just a little FYI, so the belladonna is going to protect the scarlatina, the heparsulf, the rheumatic fever, which, remember, it's a pus-producing. Heparsulf activates macrophages to go around and gobble up. So does silica. Terebinthia is for protecting the liver, the kidneys for the nephritis. And rustox is for the excess lactic acid that can produce stiffness. It can also go into some stiffen the neck, symptoms like that, delirium, fever, chill like that. But more often than not, now what we're seeing is pandas, which is autoimmune against the causing inflammation in the brain. So I think that's driven up by antibiotics, driven up by the tight junctions being opened, and then driven up by the already existing RNA viruses, measles, and so on that produce or drive cerebral inflammation. Let's see. Yep. So this is particularly in the questionnaire at the beginning, Mom, did you take antibiotics? So what we want to do is actually, maybe I just thought of this right now, is have a feedback form. Gave this nosode, these are the symptoms that are coming up, so that we can really clear and hone our things. If you've had reports back from parents, we want to do that, okay? So that'll be on the website shortly. So measles, this is from a silent meditation I did a couple years back. And again, because we have these outbreaks or whatever they are, I personally believe that somebody's gone around and dropped off wild measles virus or vaccine strain measles virus inactivated throughout the world, causing a worldwide outbreak of measles. The thing that they don't know is that this. So I decided to do somebody's microphone, mute please, thanks, this meditation. And this is the image that I saw, that there was the parenchyma and there was this red halo on the side. And then behind that were the stars. And this red halo was reflective of the amount of inflammation that the individual needs to produce in order to survive in the external environment. So I'm going to just go through these ideas. There is an article, blog on the website that has this image as it. A measles is necessary stimulator toward survival. It touches upon the intersection of the individual and the outside world, i.e. the intestinal lining, and engages our full potential of living human beings. So it engages our full potential. So it calls on the body an immune response that activates you into survival. The intended to be contracted between 5 and 7 years of age, to reduce the inherited miasmatic limitations and free the child from that burden. So when the child goes through this immunological response, it's activating their immune system and clearing the miasmatic inheritance of the individual from the family lineage. The degree of inflammation is equal and opposite to the degree of suppression exerted upon the individual and or the frailty of that individual. So it means that a very frail individual with a weak inner is going to have a very large inflammatory response, and that response can kill that child. Some individual that's immune system is heavily suppressed, that inflammatory response also can come up, and if you're healthy, you will have a mild, fine rash, just as a clear, definitive border of this is who I am, and that's the external environment. And so my understanding is that what they're doing with those measles epidemics is what you're seeing is people standing up and getting clear. If we could clear the polio vaccine from the state and just hand out measles, then you're going to see us claiming our own autonomy. It provokes a kickback where we exert to claim our own autonomy. Excites the quest of the individual to defend its own nature. Calls upon the inflammatory response of the immune system needed to fight the subjugation of their will. So we can thank them that they're using measles to drive the vaccine paradigm, because what it's doing is it's activating all the fire inside of us. Yes, I'm calling it contagious disobedience, really. Okay, so now I'm going to open this up for questions. Let's see. Large. I don't know how to do that. If anybody has any questions regarding this part so far, what we've done with the schedule, the philosophy, and HP responses.
Kate?
Yes.
Hi, this is Amber. So
Hi.
I'm wondering if we're going to give tuberculinum in this country as well as our first remedy, and for our families who have been in the program for, you know, some time, if we should go back and have them do that.
So you can use it on a case-by-case situation. And so particularly if they're in this country, but they come from Europe, they have a strong European descent. So that's one of the questions I ask, especially in my vaccine clearing ones, is, you know, where is a family from? Are you first generation? No, you come from the Europe. Where? So then I always start with tuberculinum there to get for vaccine detox. And I would say the same would be for the HP program. But otherwise, I wouldn't necessarily use the tuberculinum. If you're seeing Candida there, I would actually start with Candida. That's not written in our program, but I would start with that, particularly if there's been a lot of antibiotics.
In the 200C?
200C, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep. New kit is $111 with the streptococcinum, and with the tuberculinum, she was just throwing it in there for free before, and I don't know if Sandra, you can answer that one if you've ordered that kit, if that one is costing more.
Sorry, can you repeat this, if I were?
The tuberculinum kit, is it more expensive?
It was $88.
Yeah, so it's the same price. Yeah, so the new price, well, so I guess if they haven't raised the price of the old FHCi kit. And for those people who have, so you need to kind of organize your own thinking about this and potentially review this again so that you can talk clearly, because when you mention polio, even like I mentioned it just in passing to people here and there, it excites this fear, fight, flight response in them. And they're not going to hear anything that you have to say after that. So to introduce that to you know, people who have sort of started the program, you've already had a spiel with them, you know, you may not need to do that. Or you can still order the old kit, and if you have old booklets, you know, use that. But the new, you can't get those booklets, you know, as you make your transition and get your, you know, elevator speech together, you know, gradually transit your families into the new kits. And so the INE is on holidays now, but when they come back from their break, and Uma, you can clarify, this is what my understanding was, is that they were going to have the polio and strep in the order that we've organized it in the kit, as opposed to, you know, how it was before. So the question of a lot of intestinal issues, yes, polio 200C, you might need to do a whole clearing protocol. You could even start, so I did my proving at the 30C level, but I took probably 6 or 8 doses of that. And you can also consider, if they had a polio vaccine, to give first the inactivated polio nosode, vaccine nosode, just to clear that vaccine, and yeah, and then go to the real polio nosode, the disease one. And unfortunately, so I don't know about the source of that polio from Helios, its historical dose, and INE won't declare what their source is. So I don't know where it comes from. It might come from I know that at the first homeoprophylaxis conference, there were those two from Germany, and they had done a polio proving, and I know Elizabeth had asked them to get the remedy. So maybe it's from that proving, but where they got theirs from, I still don't know that. Anyways. Giving polio nozo to adult, yes, it's fine. Is the protocol, what is the protocol to clear the vaccine? So we're going to not talk about vaccine clearing right now. That's going to go in the further advanced HP training courses. So we just want to stick with the pure HP program. I'm also just going to look at the time. Okay, so it looks like, well, we lost about 10 minutes. So I want to it says not to treat the reaction or the nozos with homeopathy or essential oils. But then there's a box where it gives specific homeopathic remedies for the period of illness. It is a bit confusing. It does say at the top of that not to give HP during different remedy responses, but it does say that you get stuck. So you might need to give, you might need to give another HP dose, but then if you're stuck, you may need one of those remedies. So it's in there just to help parents realize that there are remedies for that immune system process. So I'm going to just carry on then, because we have a bit more to go through for the practical. Okay, so these are the new booklets. You're going to see them online. These are the prices. That F is a typo. UK booklet, the additional child is cheaper. UK has a tuberculinum. We're waiting on the Portuguese update, and the Japanese one got lost somewhere along, and we're actually going to be developing the India one pretty soon here. So these are all available on Amazon, Amazon UK, and Amazon has updated their platform so that they're going to be able to be for sale all around the world. So you will can avoid some shipping costs, but right now it's on 5 different platforms: Amazon.com, .ca, .eu, .uk, .de, which is Denmark, and I think there might be another European country there, but okay, so family membership platform. So this family membership waiver document is going to be modified with the prices that we're going to get to in a moment. That's the only change to that. That will be up on the website in the next few days. The initial health profile, we reviewed that, so I'm going to include that form in there. And then once you download it, you will modify it like you did previously. And that will be your document that you give to your families. And then we have our alternate fee schedule, which we're going to review right now. So from the research, it showed that, just doing a single payment, no scheduled visits with random calls and emails, that there are a certain number of families that you will never hear from again. And we don't know whether they're doing the program or not. And some of those families are actually, you can tell how expedient they are in getting their paperwork. They are set good to go. But there's other families that are not so adept at the program, and they need more hand-holding. And so we developed these options, and right now I don't have the EU and UK prices on here. So we initially, this is the base costs that we're charging now. Or if you are in one of those states where you charge more, this is the base cost for one child and the additional child. So that has not changed. So If you're going to opt for this option, which is the initial consult and 2 scheduled visits, and we recommend them to be done like at 3 or 4 months, and then again at 8 months, so that it's really the beginning months, how is a child responding? Some HP supervisors had already initiated a, reminder once a month to do that. We also now have our HP family newsletter that goes out once a month. But these initial, they would be 15-minute appointments. Here it is. At either 2 rates, $55. This is our suggested pricing. We're going to publish it. You can modify as you need. For those in states where you charge more, the suggested pricing is $75 per visit. So it would be the initial cost, plus if it's 2 visits, that's $110. Or the initial plus 4 scheduled visits, initial plus 16 scheduled, for a total for the program. And they can either pay you up front, and we recommend that they do that, or have the second payment by the second visit or something like that, because they may say, oh, I'll do this and then I'll just pay you for those visits when I come in. And therefore you're out actually that initial, and then you don't get to follow up on them. So you want to schedule that, and you're going to manage that as best as you can. So this also covers appointments in the first 16 months. We want to make sure they get through that 200 series. Are they on track? When do they need to come in for constitutional care? These things like that. Or sometimes they've had a baby and they get off track, but then when they get the new baby, they make a promise to themselves that they're going to stay on track. Having these appointments is going to help them move through this. So for London, you can use the higher price. Yes, you can. And we'll just work out, the equivalent to these prices here. So then that's for the first 16 months. Then they can have the additional option of, 2 visits for the 10M series, 4 visits, or 6 visits. And you can decide this. So this whole form is going to be on your waiver form. It's also going to be on the website, but on your waiver form, you get to eliminate it down to exactly what you're charging. So if you're for the base plus the additional, just publish this. And if you know that you're going to feel, if you want to offer all 3 different or 4 different scenarios, no scheduled, 2, 4, 6, publish all of them. If you would feel more comfortable, and you can experiment with that, say I want to do 4 visits, 6, and you can also, have your basic course. And then if you have a family that you think is going to need more, then you can make the recommendation for more like that. So we really like this. And we, the goal isn't for you to try and get as much money out of these people as possible, but it really is about managing their insecurities and follow through. Can they do the remedy dosing? And there's people that can't, and we discovered that through our research, is that there are people who are incapacitated. They think HP is a great thing, but their life, they lose the booklets, they lose the kids, the divorced families, so on and so forth. This price does not include the kit price. The kit and the booklets are separate. This is all just supervision price. Yes. Okay. Next is moving on to what's in store for us. So we want to, so everything's been updated. Polio is the password. Just give me a few days to get the documents up there. And if anybody has any questions for review. So also when you're making your family membership payments, polio is the new password. And we need you to complete the eval form and proficiency questions. That's on the place where you signed in to join us today. And we have dates to be announced for the advanced HP training modules. They are still under development, but the 2 modules that will be the free ones, but they're mandatory because they have to do with the updates and really getting you guys to be the best HP supervisors, are the ethics and legal, and then how to talk with the public. And the timing of the ethics and legal is in the next month or 2. And how to talk with the public, I'm expecting in the summer. Part of our goal, according to our strategic plan, was really to give HP supervisors the language to efficiently communicate, and you're naturally going to be doing that. And then next year, to really drive our public outreach models, and then you are well versed and able to respond to all the questions coming in. And then a few things about that is we do have 2 promotional weeks this year, the Homeopathy World Awareness Week and International Homeoprophylaxis Awareness Week. And we need blogs. There are many people who said, I'll go back to the payments. There are many people who said that they didn't have enough families. How can they maintain their membership? We're very forgiving, but we want you to be in it. So either redo the training or write a blog. We need blogs. So the more you are in it, the more you're thinking about it, the more you're actively involved in it. Do a public lecture. That gives you 5 points. Then that makes you better at it. The family membership is the same. Yeah, we'll get to the payments in 1 second. Okay, so the advanced training is going to go, we're going to talk more about mothers and infants biomes and look at all the places that it can get dysregulated, and then homeopathic treatment of that. So that's not in HP, but it's really helping to condition the situation for HP. Looking at previous vaccine or toxicity issues and comparing that with HP responses. Because it's like 1 in 10 children who come to you are the ideal HP recipient and who will skate through the program. It's the other children, how do we get their systems geared up so that they can do HP? So other forms of immune system suppression, vaccine injury recovery, and then interwoven through that is, so this whole last year, unwittingly and unwillingly, I dove deep into a poison that's poisoning the entire food chain. But I've learned so much, and it is, anyways, that's going to be woven in between all these things. There's more things on this advanced training platform, but I just haven't got that far yet. So I notice we are now, I do believe that that's the last slide. Yep, at 1.5 hours. And so we'll keep recording. I'm going to escape out of this and put everybody on pictures. And let's see. I don't know how to do that. Oh, I need to stop sharing. So we can all see. And if you have any more questions, and Sarah, will you monitor the chat box because I just closed it. If we do have active people, if you want to show us your cameras, then we can wave and say hi. So really, anybody, if you have questions or comments or something more to say, we can just smile at each other.
Sorry, are you recommending that children as young as maybe 2 weeks can start on the program?
Yes. Yeah. So some mothers, they will sign up with you when they're pregnant. and so that you can have that information. I mean, once they get to you, that's what you get when you get, but you would still go through it very quickly like that, even if they're 2 years of age. The first 2 weeks, then 3 weeks, and then 6 and 7 weeks. And so part of the scheduling of the program is immune system stimulation, adaptation, and rest. Now, the difference between why these ones can be closer together is you're not getting that same immune system stimulation that, say, whooping cough is pulling forth. You're establishing a biome, and that immune system stimulation requires the rest so that the next immune system stimulation, because the vital force, that immune response calls on the vital force, right? So, but in those early 2 weeks, because we're just establishing the biome, there shouldn't be that same immunological response. And I would say for doing this additional appointments, to actually schedule something before starting the whooping cough, in the first 3 months, or after the first dose of the whooping cough would be the ideal time, just to get the reactions. And we'll have a feedback sheet where you can just enter in these reactions, and we can log that and begin to get a more collective understanding of what's happening through that. Yep.
So is the solutions book going to be updated, or
Yes,
it's going to be the
I think it will. Yep, the table be updated. I mean, the old ones are out, and now the Amazon platform is completely changed, and I'm all done with glyphosate. That was next on my list to update that one. Yeah. And that will be once we do our public education platform, to really refine the languaging about that, so it's not exciting, people's polio fear, fight, flight response. And even by us talking about it here, because this is the first, and means that the first time it's been brought to active consciousness at this time, I want to see if anybody else sees simultaneous somebody else introducing this idea. I really want to know that, because history tells a lot of different things, and if you are open to it, you can read history in the present time. It would be great to see the future also, because supposedly that's here as well. But so we are part of that change. So anyways.
Is there a concern with Amazon possibly taking or not offering vaccine books anymore, that the program booklet would not be on there? And if so, is there a platform we'll be moving to, do you think?
It's a question that I have. So originally all of my books and those books are published on CreateSpace, which independently contracted with Amazon. And then Amazon made a deal, and CreateSpace dissolved, and now they're all directly loaded on Amazon. And that is on my list, because we've been seeing this stuff. So far, vaccine free, there's publishers, copyright, they're a platform to sell it. I don't know exactly how that works. It is on my list to call them and just see. The HP doesn't say anything about vaccines. It just says homeoprophylaxis. So I don't believe it could be classified as anti-vaccine something or other. But it's different than, Amazon Prime is a membership platform, and I don't know, where's the market? Because there's free speech. You can't, if they're doing that, they're stepping on one of the biggest constitutional rights that we have. So, yeah, I don't know what to say about that. Okay, other questions?
Kate, there's a question from the chat. If parents want to give HP in water, do you use 1 ounce for a single dose?
Yeah, 1 ounce is fine. Yep. Yeah. Who is AMC in the chat? Anyways, good question.
That was Jeanette.
Okay. So I think that we are done for today. It seems like everybody's quiet. Really, I love the opportunity to speak more with everybody because I think it fires them up, and that's what the sessions coming up or more is helping us to refine and hone and connect us and give us more purpose. If you want to do the polio nosode, depends. You know, I really am loving 30Cs these days, being a high potency trained practitioner. But you can do them both. You can do a whole cease clearing, you know, do 30, 200, 1M, 10M. The more that we do it, the better off we'll be. I'm totally fired up and charged with my ability to discern and think for myself. So maybe it's contagious. And yeah. And, you know, thinking about it, like if you look at the older people who pre-polio vaccine era, they don't have these inflammatory issues, even though they're eating this junk food, like the glyphosate sprayed food. And that's been a question for me, is like, why is that? And I just actually realized it yesterday. It's like, oh, it's this polio vaccine situation, is that they were exposed prior to the vaccine epidemic of inactivated polio vaccine. Mm-hmm. All right. So we'll meet again. Thanks for listening. The recording will be available. It takes about an hour or two to render on my computer, and then it'll be on the platform, and I will put the PDF of the PowerPoint there as well, and you can take the slides. And so the next to be updated is actually the training public lecture, which will have some of these slides in it. So, but that one won't be just yet. So that then when you're doing a public lecture, you can get that public lecture slide and navigate your way around the pieces. Okay, thanks for everybody. Remember, yeah, eval and proficiency questions, 2 weeks, we'll get out certificates to you and pass it on. Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, Kate.
Yep,
Bye.
bye-bye. How do I do this end?